XCOM Enemy Unknown, a modern reimagining of a classic strategy game, feels like a Hollywood adaptation of nerdy source material. This is Michael Bay's XCOM, full of glitz and glamour, slickness and swagger, bombast and badassery. It's a great-looking strategy game, but it's a strategy game that doesn't want you to think all that much, and it certainly doesn't want you to deviate from the script. Just as Michael Bay's movies are all quick cuts and big action set pieces, XCOM Enemy Unknown wants you to move fast, act decisively, and savor the cutscenes. Much in the same way Michael Bay's movies work best when you switch off and enjoy the moment, XCOM Enemy Unknown suffers the more you subject the design to close scrutiny. The premise of the new game by Firaxis is the same as the old game designed by Julian Gollop and published by Microprose almost 2 decades ago. You command an organization codenamed XCOM, tasked with combating extraterrestrial invaders. XCOM forces are expected to battle aliens at abduction sites, rescue civilians from terror attacks, intercept and shoot down UFOs, recover and research alien technology, and discover the aliens' mysterious nature. It's fantastic to see countries all over the world, all 16 of them, come together to combat the alien threat. If XCOM's financial backers are comprised of a select few countries, XCOM's elite soldiers are thankfully much more diverse. This is a game that could see an Israeli man and a Saudi woman fighting side by side, both missing their targets completely. Clearly, elite is in reference to something other than marksmanship. Still, it's very heartening to see Earth united for once. So double thumbs up for alien invasions which cause worldwide devastation. The new game, like the old, has a storyline running through its campaign. The difference is, the new game is much flashier in its presentation and much more in your face. There are cutscenes throughout the game and not just for advancing the storyline. Aliens announce their appearance in battles with cutscenes. Missed shots are highlighted with cutscenes. Deaths are depicted with cutscenes. And there are even cutscenes when your soldiers are maneuvering into position. Fortunately, most of the cutscenes are skippable. It's quickly evident Firaxis began its design process for this new XCOM game with one simple question. How do we get the player who believes Gears of War is the epitome of modern gaming to play a strategy game? Make no mistake, this is XCOM for the Gears of War set. It uses the Unreal Engine. The character designs look like meatheads, and more damningly, it uses a cover mechanic. Here's why cover systems are awful. Their very presence implies the game developer doesn't believe you have the common sense to use the environment to find cover yourself. Here's how the original game treated cover. If you put cover between your enemy and yourself, you're in cover. Want to take a shot? Step out of cover, take a shot, then step back into cover. XCOM Enemy Unknown's cover system, aside from casting aspersions on your ability to think for yourself, necessitates maps filled with conveniently placed cover to crouch behind. So unlike the 1994 game which used randomized maps based on blocks of elements, the 2012 game requires handcrafted maps that are effectively movie sets. As a result, the tactical maps in the new XCOM lack the unpredictability of the original. What makes the tactical battles in the new game ultimately disappointing is the way the aliens behave. They are actors waiting for you to yell action before hitting their marks. This is easily demonstrated. Here's the valiant XCOM squad at the start of a mission. You'll note the soldiers are exposed and vulnerable. If left in this position, they are obviously going to be cut down since the Sky Ranger's noisy entrance would have alerted every alien around. Let's see the aliens put in motion their dastardly plan by immediately ending XCOM's turn. The aliens are clearly moving into position and will undoubtedly unleash a furious fusillade of fire shortly. Let's end the turn again to watch the slaughter commence. Any moment now, death comes a-calling. All things considered, this is a terribly polite alien invasion. The aliens are here to sow terror and slaughter humans, but they're considerate enough to wait for you. While the aliens do move about, there's definitely a threshold that transforms them from aimless amblers to motivated combatants. If you have played on a map before, you will more or less know where the alien mobs are going to be on it. This naturally leads to a standard battlefield tactic. Order a soldier to move forward to attract the attention of a mob, then withdraw to a prepared killing field. Be careful doing this though. You wouldn't want to aggro too many mobs at once, because the aliens do not play by the same rules on the battlefield as your soldiers. The aliens get a free move when they are activated, and they will generally use it to move to cover. The worst possible thing you could do in this game is to inadvertently draw the attention of several mobs with the last move of your turn, because then the aliens would first get a free move during your turn before swarming all over your squad during their turn. XCOM Enemy Unknown is less about cover than it is about triggering predictable set pieces. If the battles suffer from predictability, the game systems suffer from uncertainty. Things just happen in this game, and it's difficult to figure out why, because Firaxis has put the systems in deep cover and hidden them from sight. Granted, this is meant to be an accessible strategy game for players new to them, but Firaxis has unfortunately created a strategy game that discourages players from thinking strategically. One quick and dirty definition of strategy is it involves the marshalling of resources with a view to execute a plan. It's hard to marshal resources when you don't actually know how much you possess in the first place. This may be a strategy game with numbers being crunched under the hood, but it is very conflicted about presenting them to you. It will gladly display the mission and kill stats for soldiers, but not how much experience they currently have. How much experience does a kill confer? How much experience do your soldiers need to earn a promotion and another valuable ability? The game doesn't deign to tell you, and when it does offer numbers, they're generally not of much use. For example, the Officer Training School tactic Wet Work increases experience acquisition by 25%, which is a very specific amount, but useless without knowing the current level of experience and experience gain. Now consider the icons representing weapons and ammo. See how the icon changes as ammo depletes. Isn't that clever? Well, how many rounds does that rifle hold now? How many shots can you take before the weapon is empty? How many rounds does the weapon hold when it is fully loaded? The heavy suppression ability expends more ammo than an ordinary shot, but how much more precisely? How much ammo does the Foundry Project Ammo Conservation conserve exactly? Why are you being forced to make haphazard guesses? Here's how the 1994 game represented this. It's immediately evident an aim shot and a snapshot each expend a single round, whereas burst fire from an auto shot uses 3. The maximum number of rounds per magazine is clearly stated, as is the number of rounds in the currently loaded magazine. There is no guesswork required at all. Far from being oblivious, Firaxis actually understands why this is important. Consider shot probability and how it's represented. Taking a shot at this alien would have this percentage of success. Click on the More Info button and you're given a detailed breakdown of how the game arrived at that number. This lets you understand the factors affecting the current shot, and even more crucially, it tells you how to plan for future shots. If Elevation provides this amount of bonus for a shot, you will now be able to better evaluate if moving a soldier to an exposed elevated position is worth taking the risk. This is a fantastic way of representing the data, a broad overview with the option to get a detailed breakdown, and one of the few ways the new game is a marked improvement over the old. So why isn't this approach used consistently throughout the game? The decision to replace the original game's brilliant time unit system for tactical movement and action on the battlefield clearly stems from the ridiculous notion that too many numbers and choices are bad for the player. To understand why this notion is ridiculous, take a look at Dota 2, the most played title on Steam. One of the first choices in that complex team sport is to choose one of over 100 heroes, each with multiple skill and item builds. time units aren't complicated. They involve the simple math you would need to get by on a daily basis. For example, XCOM Enemy Unknown costs $59.95. You have a $100 bill. How much money would you have left after buying XCOM Enemy Unknown? That's not exactly a mind bender that leaves you clutching your head, is it? Yet Firaxis believes this simple math is beyond the modern gamer. That decision to do away with the time unit system has repercussions in the tactical game. Firaxis obviously wants you to move quickly and act decisively with a new two-step system. But it's hard to be decisive when you're filled with doubt. Why can't the soldier see that alien from here? If you move this soldier there, would she have line of sight to that alien? This is a problem because you do not have the flexibility of the time unit system to make fine adjustments to positioning in the new game. It's all or nothing. You can move or you can act, or you can move and act. Firaxis doesn't trust you to be smart enough for any decision making that's any more complicated than that. Now there's absolutely a place for an accessible introduction to XCOM, but this one could have done better even in that respect. There are elements in the game that are going to baffle neophytes. For example, positioning in the game is tile-based, but some of the area of effect indicators use circles. Is the tile bisected by the circle in the area of effect? That question leads to moments of unnecessary doubt during battles. Can you save this soldier with a medkit from over here? Will that alien be caught in the rocket blast? Can you save this civilian by standing in this spot? Here's another example. There's an arrow on unit labels, but no hint as to what it's for. Sometimes it's green and points up, and other times it's red and points down. What's it indicating? Morale? Amount of cover? Cholesterol level? It turns out it's indicative of bonuses or penalties that currently affect the soldier. You would never guess that from reading the manual, which spans all of 2 pages discussing gameplay elements. XCOM Enemy Unknown's major problem is it wants to be an accessible game for players who do not play strategy games, yet it also badly wants to pay tribute to a hardcore strategy game from a different era. It's not impossible to do both, but Firaxis has not pulled it off with this game. Instead, the developer has created a tightly scripted XCOM experience that restricts the player to a very narrow path. There is only one way to play XCOM Enemy Unknown, and that is the way Firaxis intended. Any attempts to play the game your way will only raise more questions about the design choices. Why can't you pick a soldier's class? Why can't you retrieve a medkit from a soldier's corpse and use it during battle? Why can't a laser rifle be built with less than 12 engineers? Why does that one particular soldier have to survive the final mission? You cannot fault Firaxis for having a clear idea of what its version of XCOM should be, but Firaxis can and should be criticized for not coming up with a better justification for its heavy-handed design decisions than Firaxis said so. This is particularly frustrating because it goes against the spirit of the original game. Julian Gollop was challenged by Microprose to come up with a better game, and he, in turn, challenged his players with a great strategy game, the best of Gollop's 30-year career, a game that respected his players' intelligence and provided ample opportunity for player expression through tactics. Firaxis, on the other hand, has a publisher who believes strategy games aren't contemporary, and so the developer grossly underestimates its players. It's a truly absurd situation when you really think about it. Here's a game all about standing up to alien terror, made by a developer terrified of alienating gamers. The storyline purports to be about forcing mankind into taking the next step in its evolution, but the gameplay is all about restricting players and keeping them in the dark. XCOM Enemy Unknown says a lot about modern gaming, but mostly it says a lot about modern game developers. There's an old Mad magazine joke that goes something like this. You know you're a parent when you object to all the things you enjoyed when you were younger. Like overprotective new parents, Modern game developers are constantly terrified of losing their charges. They keep a tight grip on their players' hands at all times, never fully trusting that their players are capable of learning, the way the game developers themselves did, playing the games that inspired them to get into game development. Games like the original XCOM. Still, there is reason enough to be optimistic about XCOM as a franchise going forward. As befitting the house built by that master of iterative game design, Sid Meier, Firaxis has demonstrated a knack for turning decent games into really good ones. While the first two DLC for XCOM were disappointing by Firaxis standards, here's hoping the developer will do its level best to turn XCOM Enemy Unknown, a decent XCOM game, into a really good one. But to do that, Firaxis must first keep this in mind. The enemy may be unknown, the terror may cut deep, the danger may be apocalyptic, but humanity will prevail because we are quick to learn and ever prepared to adapt. That's XCOM.